Château de Purnon's vast English park extends to the south of the domain. A stroll through acres of prairies leads us to the chateau orchards and potager garden. With spring now upon us, the park, orchards and potager have burst back into life. At Purnon, the chateau is not actually the oldest building on the estate. That title belongs to this building from the mid-17th century. Over 100 years older than Château de Purnon.
So this is the Moulin Bigiard, or in English we'd say Bigiard's Mill. It dates from the mid-17th century, and just like the chateau itself, it's fully heritage listed.
Let's go have a look.
So this would have been the original entrance, and it's got this quite elaborately carved stone for what would have just really been a farmhouse. I mean, look at these little balls sitting on top of these things that are a little bit like a column, and have a look at this. How much the weather over time has eroded the soft tuffeau stone. It's almost like a coral reef. It's quite amazing. And you can see here where shortly after we arrived, well, we can see the date. It was back in June 2021. We installed across the estate 50 or 60 of these movement detectors. And this is actually quite useful because it tells us that this, at least this piece of stone here, has not moved at all since we put that in place now, well, almost to a day 3 years ago. It's the 7th of the 6th, which was yesterday. So yesterday, 3 years ago.
So in this room, you can see that the beam has split at some stage and they've put in support for it to hold it up. And you can see that it's quite dipped, isn't it? It's very low, the roof here. These are leftover ceramic parts of the pipe that is used for the irrigation of the potager. And this room has a remarkably small door. Look at the height compared to my height. It's a full head height lower than it comes up to my shoulders. And then this enormous fireplace, which is really quite elaborate for a farmhouse, except the keystone has certainly dropped quite dramatically. Some slate tiles that have obviously come off the roof at some point. And what is this? Somebody's case, which is now home to a heap of spiders.
So one of the things about the Moulin Bigiard is, even though sections of it were abandoned and have been abandoned probably for close to 100 years, there is this small section here where people were living really up until about the 1980s. And we can tell here because they've got the fairly modern, what would have been modern for the time, counter system for the electrical connection. And so that tells us that even though people haven't lived here in most of the Moulin for a long period of time, there was a small section where people were still living until the modern era. would have been their toilet. This is still in pretty good condition. In fact, this part of it really is in pretty good condition, and I guess this is why they were still living in it. It's starting to get a bit overgrown now. There's some work to do. This fireplace has certainly seen better days, but it's not too bad, really. So this would definitely be the oldest bread oven on the estate, and because this building predated the chateau, it would have definitely been the bread oven before the construction of the boulangerie in the chateau itself. And look at it, it's enormous. I mean, this stick here, this must be 70 centimetres long or so at least, and I mean, I'm not even reaching halfway when I reach in like that. Internally, it's in pretty good condition, but there is a crack in the wall over there. But we know, having seen it from the outside, where it sticks out of the building, the stonework has collapsed quite a lot. I won't be crawling in there anytime soon. A couple of old beds here. They've certainly seen better days.
I think this is the smallest of the rooms.
Yeah, and we know that they bricked this little doorway off at some stage, which is...
Through to where the bread oven is?
Yes, yeah.
Because that room's enormous, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I mean, it had a fireplace in it, so...
Yeah, and we know this
big
fireplace
for a
is
small room.
sort of on both sides.
I feel like the ceiling here is in pretty bad condition, isn't it?
Yeah, it's completely collapsed in.
Oh no. Can you see what I see?
Yeah. Yeah, a section of the roof's come down.
Definitely the last time I had the drone up here, there was no slate missing on the roof, and that's quite an enormous hole now.
Well, that's a shame, because that's that's probably come down in those recent storms that we've had.
I think so.
But that's quite a significant section of roof. We'll have to work out some way of patching that at some stage, because it will just let a lot of rainwater in over time. Oh. Every time we come up, we discover new things. Some of them quite unpleasant.
This floor's in good condition though.
Yeah, look at this.
Oh yeah.
Someone's medicinal tonic for the cold winter months. It's been there a long
Take it and
time.
clean it up.
Okay.
There you go.
Cheers. So just heading up to the first floor, there's a lot of broken tiles on the floor from the roof. In fact, by what looks like perhaps from an earlier roof. So this enormous room with its dipping floor, which we saw the beam of when we were in the room below it, this was probably a large living space, given the size of it and obviously the fireplace in it. And gosh, look how much the floor has come away from the wall. That's quite an alarming thing to see. And this is particularly concerning. One of our little movement sensors has come down completely. So that suggests there are still some serious structural issues in this room and in this part of the building. So structurally, this room seems to be in better condition. There doesn't seem to be the same issue of the movement with the floor and the wall. And the charpente or the oak beams are in not bad condition given their age. And I guess that means that the roof here is still relatively watertight. And looking on the floor here, despite the fact that there's really only the tiles between us and the outside, I can't see any evidence of moisture where the rain's getting in. And that should explain why it's in such good condition.
I'm going to show you one of my favourite things up here. This is the Moulin Bigiard's 19th century glass house. And it's just a really beautiful reminder of how active the potager and how productive this area of the domain would have been. Come in and have a look. So in here we find remnants of when the glass house was in use. For example, these cast iron pipes, which were part of the heating system for the glass house. So there's a burner behind the back wall here, and these pipes carried hot water through, and so during the winter months this area would have been quite warm. It's absolutely full of little old pots. I guess here there was a bench that would have had the seedlings and the plants on it, and here also you can see the remainders of where there would have been shelves, and this too. It's more recent, but bringing this back to life one day will be such an incredible project. Very much a bygone era, isn't it? The window still opens with one tiny fragment of glass left. Actually, when we arrived at Purnon, we saw that this glass house was marked on the plans. We couldn't find it, it was so covered. So we'd been here for quite some time before we found it. But actually in the top corner here, there was a huge tree growing out of it. And so the tree, with some help from some local tradespeople, the tree has been removed to protect as much as possible what we can at the moment. So at least that it won't deteriorate anymore because of the tree. But it needs a lot of work to restore it, doesn't it? This back section of the Moulin Bigiard is actually in a walled garden, so it would have been completely enclosed. Now it wouldn't have acted as a potager like the Château Potager, which is just behind, but it was completely enclosed, so they may have grown produce here. There's certainly some fruit trees here, there's cherry trees, but it was a much more practical space, I think, because come and have a look at this and I'll show you what we found. If I can find it, it's pretty overgrown in here at the moment. So the chateau itself has a glacier, which in the 18th century, when the chateau was built, acted as an enormous freezer during the summer months. So snow and ice were put in with layers of hay, and the food was stored and it stayed cool or frozen for the entire summer. And this is the same concept here. Now on the plan, this is marked as a cave. So it could have been a glacier, or more likely it was a cool storage space. And so it's quite long. You can see it's enormous. At the end in the stonework, you can see where the roof structure, where the beam for the roof structure would have been. So it would have had a very, very low roof, probably triangular, because we can see based on the shape of what's left in the stonework there. And this would have provided the Moulin Bigiard with a cool storage space. Tim's really upset because he's cleaned this out before and it all just goes straight back. But actually, I mean, the stonework here is in quite good condition. Aside from the fact there's no roof, no door. I mean, here's the remnants of the hinge for the door, which I guess was wood, and I guess that's what remains of it.
So this strange structure that you can see behind me is the Moulin Bigiard's pigeonniere, or dovecote. Now in medieval France, and then in the centuries that followed, being able to own pigeons was essentially a feudal right. It was directly connected to how much land that a noble family owned. Now, calculating that is actually relatively easy. Each of the small niches behind me is called a bouillon, and a bouillon was the small niche in which the pigeons actually lived and mated. And you're entitled to one bouillon, or one mating box or mating niche, for every acre or thereabouts of land that you own. So for those who use the metric system, that's just under half a hectare. And so if we add up the number of boulons and we on one wall and we multiply it by 4, because there were essentially 4 walls when the Pigeonnier was in its heyday, and in fact here you can see a photo of it from the 1940s before the front wall had actually collapsed. By calculating that number and then multiplying it by 4, it gives us some sense of just how much land the family who built and owned the Moulin-Bigiard would have actually owned in the local area. Now, there are lots of causes of the French Revolution, but believe it or not, these dovecotes or pigeonniers that you can see behind me actually form one of the many grievances. Imagine that you're a tenant farmer eking out a subsistence living on the agricultural lands around us, and the landlord, the noble family to which you pay a rent, is running his pigeons on your land. As soon as you sow the crop, those pigeons descend on the seeds and start to consume them. Their blood must have boiled. And is it any wonder that this was one of the many grievances that ultimately led to revolution? Well, there you have it, the Moulin-Bigiard, an integral part of the estate inside the chateau walls, but older even than the chateau itself. We have so many priorities here at Purnon, saving the chateau and its incredible outbuildings. And so in the meantime, we have to keep this space alive, and we can't wait to share with you our plans for what we hope to do here in the years ahead.
Remember, if you'd like to follow the restoration of Château de Purnon more closely, we post a daily update in our Instagram stories. We post an exclusive weekly video on Patreon, where this week Tim takes you on a journey through French history through the eyes of hundreds of coins we've located around the domain here. Otherwise, just hit the subscribe button, turn on your notifications, and we'll keep you up to date here.
I swear I'm going to make a collection of old coins interesting.
Good on you, babe.